What's the most terrifying, unexplainable encounter you've had with a stranger that still haunts you? Not the most terrifying or inexplicable, but one that still haunts me. I was 15, on a trip to see my dad in Europe. In a train station in France, I smelled something pretty terrible. I looked around and saw a man who was incontinently drunk, sitting in a pool of his own waste, both kinds, holding a bottle. He looked utterly defeated and miserable. He saw me looking at him and he looked back at me. That look has haunted me for 40 years. Walking home late one night in a large town. Not a soul was out. No cars either. I heard feet running up from directly behind me, quickly and quietly. My instincts took over and I turned around and talked to the guy as if I knew him. I giggled and told him he scared the shit out of me. I think I caught him off guard because he stopped running and looked confused. He started chatting with me, obviously was on, and told me he was a carny in town for the fair. He bummed a cigarette off of me and left. Pretty sure he had something unpleasant planned for me, but surprised him with my lack of fear. I started talking about how much I liked his coat, and asking him where he got it from. Somehow this worked. He calmed way down and started telling me about his coat, lol. That coat was actually ugly as, but I really didn't want to get stabbed, so I'm glad this tactic worked. I used to hitchhike on occasion around our city when I was a teenager. I waved and smiled at a teenager on the street and joked to the driver that it was my brother. The guy's demeanor changed immediately. I told him to drop me off a few blocks later. Nothing happened, but I never, ever hitchhiked again. Only later did I realize how lucky I was. I had a paper route when I was a little girl, 10 years old, in my neighborhood. One day, a man drove up beside me, parked and motioned me over. I assumed he needed directions, so I walked closer to help him. He started asking me weird questions. First about me, then about whether he could pay me to watch a man. I didn't understand. I thought that he meant spying for him because I was huge into the Three Investigators books. I kept telling him, end quote, I don't think my mom would let me. Thanks, though. So he finally described what he actually meant and asked, have you ever seen a man naked 3D? I finally got it and said, in a typical 10-year-old fashion, ew. No. And I don't want to, as I ran home as fast as I could. I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, just a few miles from where a kid named Johnny Gosh, just a couple of years older than me, disappeared while delivering papers. Then Eugene Martin disappeared 2 years later, and then Mark Allen 2 years after that, all three paperboys. If you've ever heard of missing kids on milk cartons, this is how it started. It was very traumatizing for every Gen X kid that grew up in the Midwest, especially for those of us closest to it. Following a boys' night out, I was waiting for a taxi home. A stranger comes and starts chatting to me and asked which direction I'm going. Says he's going the same way and offers to share a taxi. During the ride, he keeps asking about my night out and acting skeptical like he didn't believe me about anything. Kept saying the pubs I claimed I was at had closed ages ago and disputing that if I'd been out with friends, why I was alone now. It seemed unnecessarily standoffish for a taxi ride. When I got home, he got out the taxi and asked if he could come in my house. I told him no because I had family inside, but again, he didn't believe me and kept insisting I was lying. I let myself in, said goodbye, and closed the door in his face. He'd already started to show anger. The guy stood outside my house staring at the windows for a considerable length of time. Not necessarily a stranger, but I didn't know her all that well. We, myself, our son, and my now ex, had rented the basement out of a friend of my mom's. There was a 17-year-old girl that lived next door. Now, let me start by saying that a lot of this was caused by my ex if he ever hooked up with her, but I definitely think he at least led her on. We were on the same bus heading home. It was me and my son. Her and I got into a verbal argument, and that continued as we both walked home, me on one side of the street, pushing my son in his stroller and her on the other side. We get back to our houses, and she goes inside. It takes me longer to go inside because I had to get my son out of the stroller. So I'm holding him in the folded up stroller, trying to unlock the door. I hear a door shut behind me and I turn around and she is running at me, holding a very large kitchen knife, and she has it held up like ready to stab me when she got close enough. Pure panic set in right away. But I managed to put my leg up and kick her back as she got to us. The knife still hit me in the arm, so I did have a slight cut, but my kick was hard enough where she didn't get to any other part of my body. My son is screaming at that point, and I use the short period of time that she stumbles back to unlock my door and get inside. I called the cops, they came. She tried to run out of her house into a friend's car, but one of the cops ran after her and tackled her. They took pics of me and my injury and of my son, who thankfully wasn't injured at all. It was truly one of the scariest moments of my life. At my old job there was a 6 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. shift. I'd take a commuter bus that dropped me about 15 minutes from home. One night I got off the bus as usual, and a car slowly drove past me. Then I noticed he had pulled into the parking lot and was following me. I acted like I was walking past my street, then darted across and hid in some bushes. Watched him drive up and down looking for me. Eventually he gave up and I ran home. After that I just paid for Uber. Was on a bus in a sketchy part of San Francisco. When I said, "Move back," to the guy behind me, I realized he was staring at me with this cold and completely terrifying look. He said, "Don't tell me what to do." He kept staring at me the whole ride. I got off and sprinted to the hospital, terrified he'd follow. I've never been so certain someone was intending to do me serious physical harm. As a teen I worked a part-time job after school. If I left work exactly at 11 p.m. I could make the last bus of the night around 11:04. That made my commute a bit easier. If I got out a bit late and missed that bus, I'd have to walk about a mile down this creepy street. One night I was walking and got this eerie feeling to walk down the median strip, but ignored it. Like 5 seconds later a balding, chubby guy in a wife beater and shorts jumped out from the bushes, sweating profusely, looked at me then stared at the ground and started huffing, puffing and chuckling. I ran and he just stayed there when I looked back. I was an artist's model in college. One person booked me for photographs. His studio was more like a shed crossed with a basement. I saw tools but no camera. I smiled, set my jacket down, said I needed to grab something from my car, walked up the stairs as nonchalantly as possible, got in my car, and left. I'll never know for sure, but I'm guessing there are versions of me who died there. I was in my 20s. It was fall, and dark early. I was shopping at the local mall. I exited the mall and walked to my car. As I moved to put my key in the car door, a man suddenly appeared to my right. He looked at me, I looked at him, and he said, "Hi." I said nothing, but every nerve of my body was on alert. A second passed and he moved behind me between the cars to the next lane and walked all the way back into the mall. I know he had harmful intentions. Why he didn't act is anyone's guess, but I also know I was in flight or fight mode with fight the dominant action. I still think about this as the time I almost got kidnapped. Not unexplainable but scary. I once got into an elevator while feeling distracted. I didn't notice an angry, mentally ill person standing in the corner until the doors closed and we were alone. He was a lot bigger than me and he got angrier, closer, and louder by the second. Then we got stuck for 5 long minutes. Luckily the doors opened soon enough and I got out unharmed. Called security from my desk before anyone else got in. It was the late 1980s, and I was about 9 or 10 years old. My parents and I were eating dinner and we got a phone call, which I answered. It was some guy, who started to ask me questions. How old are you? What are you doing? Etc. After about a minute my parents asked who it was, and I said I didn't know. My dad grabbed the phone and the guy had hung up. I can still remember the sound of a ceiling fan in the background, low and slow. I was terrified and slept in my parents' room for a few nights. Around the same time, a guy was walking around our neighborhood and went to the house kitty corner from ours. He knocked on their door and asked the woman who answered, a mom of 4 kids, who lived there, while pointing at our house. And she told them how old I was, that I was an only child. My mom found out about it and raised hell. I walked into a bank robbery once. It was about 10 minutes before they closed and I needed some cash for a concert I was going to that evening. Only one other person in there at the desk with one of the 3 tellers. I remember being annoyed that the 2 free tellers practically ignoring me and then not paying attention when assisting me. He left and then suddenly they're running around frantic and locking us in. That's when they told me what I'd walked into. My ex and baby were in the car waiting and I sent him a text that it was going to be a while. I had to give statements to police and they let my ex and our daughter inside the bank despite the active crime scene because I needed to nurse her, and my ex was also a witness as he saw the guy leaving and running out of the plaza. Turns out he had hit up 2 or 3 banks earlier in the day closer to the city, with each one moving north into the suburbs, and the staff were already on high alert, but despite this he was never caught. Was at a club downtown Vancouver with my friend, both early 20s, and we went out for a smoke. Went around the corner on a busy road because there was a little community garden. A man came up to us and asked for a lighter, then a smoke and said, "My friend John told me to meet you guys here." My friend and I looked at each other like what? I said, "We don't know a John." He says, "No, my friend John told me to meet you both here right now." I said, "You've got the wrong people." He says, "No, my friend John told me to meet you here and you need to get in this cab right now." I look to my left and sure enough there's a cab 6 feet away with a hooded man holding the back door open. I realized at that moment there wasn't a single car driving or person around on this usually very busy intersection. The guy grabbed me by the back of my head, his hands were huge, and grabbed my back and started to drag me to the cab. Luckily my friend yelled out as loud as she could, "Don't FN touch her." He let me go for half a second and we ran back to the club. She called her BF at the time and he was pissed at us for getting into that situation. Glad she's not with him anymore. Could have never been seen again.